Christian Horner had a lot to say about the latest GP in Monaco, but it seems like a specific dig was thrown at what used to be a team that challenged Red Bull on a constant basis, Mercedes. Verstappen found himself in an unusual situation between both Mercedes drivers and in what will likely be the sole finish of a Mercedes driver ahead of Verstappen on a pure racing merit. Horner believes that the Silver Arrows could have done a lot better than what they did, but is this something of a cheap dig towards his former rivals after realising that Red Bull are not what they used to be in 2022 and 2023? And more importantly, what is the bigger issue that the Austrian team needs to look at? It's safe to say that Red Bull are the biggest losers of the 2024 Monaco GP, not just because of Verstappen's aborted lap in Q3 and the Perez disqualification of Q1, but also because of the massive crash that the Mexican driver participated in with Kevin Magnussen. The damage was estimated to be around $2 to $3 million, which would effectively ruin Red Bull's budget for the 2024 season in terms of bringing upgrades to fix what seems to be a car with a fundamental flaw. But if you were to ask Horner, a big issue for the Monaco GP was also the behaviour of Mercedes. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Verstappen found himself in a quite unusual situation, having to drive between both Mercedes drivers, and with the red flag actually completing the mandatory pit stop rule, there was little to no room for a surprise move from the three-time world champion. Even when he mounted the new tyres on his car and got super close to Russell, the lack of space for the 2-metre wide machines that are currently racing meant that Verstappen had nothing to do but sit back and drive for 78 laps in complete monotony. And this is something that Horner feels could have been different had it been for Mercedes playing their cards in a more proper manner and not going for a defeatist race for themselves. Talking about the actual outcome of Monaco, one that saw Ferrari being just 24 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, as well as Leclerc being only 31 points behind Verstappen in the Drivers, Horner went on to say, "I think we faced stronger competition here, but perhaps not with Mercedes. But I think with Ferrari and McLaren now certainly looking competitive, they cannot be discounted. It's a long championship and obviously they've taken a reasonable chunk of points today. I did not really understand Mercedes' race today. It was a hugely conservative race by George. To give up so much time and then go so fast at the end of the race did not really make a lot of sense. But I don't think it would have changed anyway. They weren't going to overtake anybody. It was just a very defeatist race to try and defend fifth." The narrative has shifted a lot, and a P5 here in Monaco is definitely a huge win for Mercedes, especially if you were to add the fact that it was complemented by a P7 finish from Hamilton. The fact is that Mercedes are now the fourth fastest team on the grid, so finishing ahead of Perez with both of the cars certainly promotes a bit of happiness in the Silver Arrows, while it aggravates a bit of anger from Red Bull, who are now in some competitive waters after enjoying two very dominant seasons in 2022 and 2023. While they knew times like this would happen, they had no idea it would be in such a manner like it's happening right now with Ferrari and McLaren. And while Verstappen would have likely qualified for P2 or P3 had he not touched the wall at the Turn 1 exit in the last try at a fast lap, destiny for him meant to be stuck between both Mercedes drivers in Monaco. What goes into Horner's allegation of a defeatist race is the fact that not even Russell was happy with the pace he had to promote on the medium tyres. The fact that the Brit drove 78 laps on the medium tyres, similar to Verstappen and Hamilton, goes to show that he was nowhere near the optimal driving time, losing 3 to 4 seconds from what he would have thought was optimal for Monaco, and that he reached this by not going full throttle on the straight parts of the track and driving in a higher gear. When talking about the overall outcome of the race, Russell was full of question marks as he said, "It was a long old race, a strange one as well. The first 30 laps we were tootling around. When Max pitted, I put my foot down, and it was only afterwards that I realised how much we had closed the gap on the Ferrari and McLarens. I was really pleased apologies about that. Max put me under a bit of pressure, but it was pretty under control. The only hope of a good race here was a bit of spiciness with strategy, but with the red flag, it was out of the window and we got the maximum we could. Now, we can understand the anger coming from Horner due to the severe points that his team lost. However, the nature of the track is definitely something that needs to undergo discussions as to whether or not it's worth racing under these circumstances. On a rare occasion, both Verstappen and Hamilton agreed on something. This is not a race for modern era F1 cars, and whether it would be a mandatory pit stop apart from a red flag accident or something else, a change is long overdue, as the top 10 drivers finished in the exact same order as they started. When talking about this matter, Lewis Hamilton went on to say, "I can only imagine that the race was boring for the fans. I mean, ultimately, our tyres, they can do a whole race. We have got to find ways to spice it up, maybe a mandatory 3-stop or something to spice it up a bit more. The race was non-eventful, everyone drove so slowly. It didn't matter what tyre you were on, we were driving seconds off the pace. I don't know what it was like watching, but I'm sure people were falling asleep. Because of the crash, everyone switched over to the other tyre and just managed at a really slow pace. So definitely one of the dullest races I think I've been in, but that is Monaco for you." Again, this is an opinion that has been shared by the majority of the grid, with Christian Horner having a special place in his heart for Monaco, but also admitting that something needs to change in order for this track to be kept on the calendar in the upcoming period. The calendar is only growing, and with massive interest from venues like Chicago and New York, it's very likely that the lack of Monaco's competitive factor and racing would be decisive when it comes to F1 deciding whether this venue is worth staying on the calendar. Of course, the glamour and lots of extravagance are here, but that means nothing if the drivers are utterly dissatisfied with what they have to deal with. As for Horner, the frustration can also be tracked with the lack of competitiveness the RB20 has shown in the last 3 races. Although Verstappen managed to win in Imola, while also participating in the 24-hour sim racing of Nürburgring, he failed to win in Miami, finishing P2, while missing the podium for the first time in 2024 in a race he finished completely in Monaco. This goes to show that the RB20 has a fundamental flaw, as Verstappen labelled it, and maybe Horner and Marco would be smarter to work on it rather than keep their eyes on Mercedes' garage or their shenanigans on the track. When talking about the car's further development, as well as whether or not results like this were expected in the pre-season period, Horner went on to say, "I think the issues of the RB20 are a continual process. Of course, you are into the law of diminishing returns and your focus changes depending on what your problems are. So I think quite a lot of focus will not take part on questions like, why did we have these ride issues? Why is the car struggling on the curbs? The V-Carb car is running with our suspension from last year and it does not seem to have the same issues." To top that off, it seems like a large chunk of what was planned to go into upgrades will be directed towards fixing Perez's car, one that suffered from $2 to $3 million of damage. In a period where you're trying to extract the best out of the car, this is the last news you'd like to hear. So with all of the information to hand, do you think that Red Bull will have a proper challenge on their hands in 2024? And with Verstappen's comments regarding the fundamental flaw in the car, do you think it's something that can be fixed for 2024? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.